Welcome to Death Talk Unscripted. I'm your host, Paula Adams. Today I'm joined by Theresa Evans, whose memoir, Choosing to Die, chronicles the final 86 days she spent supporting her mother through a medically assisted death. Theresa's background as an ICU nurse, a yoga teacher, and a somatic educator gives her a unique lens on autonomy, grief, and the miracle of death. Her book is powerful, beautifully written, guide for anyone navigating an end of life choice. Theresa, thank you for being with me. I am honored to share this space with you.
Oh,
So,
thank you, Paula. I'm honored to share this space with you. I
oh,
admire your writing and I share it with everybody I can because I think this topic is so important. And I feel like you are one of the principal drivers of getting the word out there.
well, thank you very much. And I owe everything that I know to the beautiful ladies that raised me, my grandmother and my mom.
Mhm.
They are, they were the star that I aspire to be, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in on some questions. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. What is it like to support your mother through the medical aid and dying journey? What was it like?
Well, um, as you can imagine, there's a lot of anticipatory grief involved in a maid journey, especially since mom set the date 3 months in advance. So it's for 3 months, you know the exact date and time your mother's going to die. But so you carry that anticipatory grief, but I can say that I'm glad that I was actually just turning, I had my 60th birthday with mom during this time, and I was glad for 60 years of lived wisdom because I and my sisters, we didn't spend 3 months crying at mom's side. We spent 3 months celebrating her, celebrating our family, celebrating our relationships. And so it was, I always say it was hard and soft at the same time. And we were able to hold the hard without pouring it all over mom. I don't know how to better describe that.
That's beautiful. I mean, I love the hard and soft part because I think that's in everything. That's in
Mhm.
birth, that's in living, and
Mhm.
definitely in dying.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I wanted to just clear up real quick, can you just give us a real quick synopsis of what medical aid in dying is where you are from?
So I do live in the United States. I married an American, but my family, I am Canadian and my family lives in Canada. So um my mom in Canada, medical aid in dying is, you can ask to die with the assistance of medication. It was legalized first in Quebec in 2015, and then in 2016, it was legalized at a federal level, which meant that it applied to all of Canada, which is different from the United States, where we're trudging along state by state trying to get some legislation in place. And as I'm sure you know, we have 14 legal states right now, and about 14 who are in the process of trying to introduce legislation. I live in Wisconsin, where it was first introduced in 2015, and it won't come to the floor again until 2027. But, and the criteria at the time that mom died, which was 2020, was that you had to be within about 6 months, you were on a likely path to death. My mom had COPD and end stage heart failure and a lot of chronic inflammation and pain issues. Um, you had to be assessed by two doctors, independent of each other. You had to be of sound mind, so you had to be able to give consent. And the biggest difference, I think, between the United States and Canada is that in Canada, it's legal to have the medication administered through an IV. So mom died at home. A nurse came to our home about an hour before the scheduled time, and she inserted two IVs in mom. And so when the doctor came, when the doctor came, um, and he administered the medication into the IV, it was so peaceful and so fast, and there was no worry that it wouldn't be enough or that she wouldn't be able to swallow it or that we had to crush, multiple pills beforehand. So I really, I know it's a hard line in the United States, and it's a line that I don't actually understand or resonate with. Um, so that is the biggest difference in Canada. And now there is a track too that has passed where you don't have to be you don't have to be looking like you're going to die in 6 months. So it's an autonomy issue in Canada.
Mhm.
Everyone has the right to decide. And so if you have, for instance, MS, you can live for years with MS. But if you feel like your MS is affecting your quality of life to the point where you don't have any quality of life, you can request track two made, which is different. That has a 90-day waiting period. Um, that's really the main difference. You still have all of the other requirements. And right now they're trying to pass made where you can make an advance request because most people that think about MAID think about it in terms of what if I get dementia?
Yeah.
Well, even in Canada right now, you have to be able to give consent at the time of either swallowing or injection. But if you have dementia, you can't give consent. So this has been delayed twice in the federal government, postponed as they're trying to work out the kinks. So that's what MAID is.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I am a huge advocate and I live in Florida, and trying to get legislators to listen to me is just insane.
Yeah,
But one of the things that, I often look at in comparison to MAID, like you said, Canada actually, autonomy is part of your constitution.
it
The right,
is.
you know, and that's what we're missing here.
Yeah,
We have a really good constitution. It just doesn't cover the actual body, mental, spiritual part of a human being. And
right.
I think that's vital. Um,
Yeah.
and so, okay. How is your background as an IC nurse and the somatic educator? How did that shape your approach? Were you able to find a certain peace or calm while others around you didn't seem to have it? Or were you able to even pass off some of your energy to kind of ease the process? Like you said, you knew for 3 months she had done
Yeah.
that. And with your sisters and even with outside, friends and circles and, your circle of people.
Well, first of all, mom didn't, at first she wanted to keep this only to herself and her three daughters. And that wasn't because she felt any shame or she just simply didn't have the energy to have to explain it to everybody. So it was a small circle that actually knew what was going on. But I think if you talk to most nurses, unless most people who have strong feelings against MAID, it's usually always comes down to a religious value system that says only God can give life and only God can take life away. But most nurses, again, most nurses who do not hold that value system um, we've all seen bad deaths. I mean, multiple bad deaths, especially in critical care. And that was part of the reason I had to leave nursing. I left nursing in 2003 because I was just butting heads with the system continuously. At the time, I was working in transplant, and sometimes it's just okay to let people die. And it got to a point where I just really felt like I was compromising my own value system. So nurses, the more we're around death, as you know, the more we talk about it, the more we understand anything, the easier it is to show up for it without a lot of fear. And that's why I think I'm the one who started the conversation with my mom, you know. And my sisters, I think they did look to me, as for sure as the medical, as a person who had the medical background, but I think, as a somatic educator and as a yoga teacher, which I still, those are, the ethical principles of yoga and somatics are what drives me as a human being, what underlies the choices I make. And that is all about pausing and sensing from the inside, what am I feeling right now? And um, before we splash it all over somebody else, what is it? And before we react to it, just sitting with it. And so I think all of that really helped me to show up. I think this was the most, I think this was the most present I've ever been for anybody in my entire life.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I knew I had 86 days, and I'm like, I don't want to waste 1 second of my time with my mom.
That's what I get from several people that I've been with two people. One person who was in California, and the other one was in Oregon. And the California one just tickled me to no end. It just really made me feel so beautiful. It was a father who was coming to his end with pancreatic cancer, and his daughter was just going into college, and
Uh,
she wanted to be a mortician.
ah,
That was her following. So her and her dad, they recorded the last 32 days together. They recorded
oh,
all their conversations, and she brought a box of happy hats and just stuff like that. And
yeah,
it was very, I got the same impression. They were embracing the time that they had.
yes,
And she was so grateful that he was awake and conscious. And even though he was tired,
yeah,
and it took him a while at the end, we could see it took him a while to form the words and get, have enough breath. But she said, I wouldn't have traded it for anything. She
yeah,
said, we watched my mom die horrible.
yeah,
Her mom had ALS. And she said, it was a bad death. She said, it put a really bad taste. So my next question is I love the metaphor of the garden. That's
uh,
one of my most favorite parts of the whole book because that's what my grams and mom did. They taught us they taught us the cycle of life through the garden.
mhm,
Spring,
mhm,
summer, fall, winter, we'd go out there and they'd tell stories. We had the summer fairies and the fall fair just to make sure that the kids stayed in the garden. And, we didn't mind picking stuff. We were looking for fairies too,
yeah, yeah,
so it wasn't work, but
yeah,
I love it. So I want to know, in what ways did your mother's act of putting the garden to bed for winter, how did that serve as a practical blueprint and a spiritual one to prepare the family for her absence?
yeah. Um, yeah, when my mom, my mom was a master gardener, and so she had a beautiful flower garden. She had had vegetable gardens her whole life too when she was able, but these last few years, she still kept a pretty prolific flower garden going. And when she asked me, so I moved in with mom. I can't, it was during COVID. I was grounded because I had a job that required a lot of international travel, and I couldn't do that. So the blessing of that was that I was able to go to Canada and move in with my mom. And my two sisters lived close by, so they were always with us too. But I lived with mom, and she asked me if I would put her garden to rest for this final. It was to prepare it for winter and for this final season. We were actually preparing the house for sale, and the very first day, I mean, as I started working out in the garden, and I love being outside, I feel like I became a gardener during that time, even though I had spent years in gardens. because I started really paying attention to what was going on and realized very quickly that the garden was mirroring exactly what was happening with mom, and that disintegration and integration are part of the process, and you can't have life without death. I mean, they just go hand in hand. And you look at the seasonal cyclings that are going on in a garden, and it's if we're not always trying to interfere with that as humans, um, in our human bodies, we go through the same cycles. And so it just, to me, and I've always said, even when I was teaching, I used to say to people, the longer I've talked about the somatics and yoga and taught and practice, the more I feel that science and God are one. I mean, there's a point where they become one and the same. And that's what I felt like I was witnessing in the garden. And believe me, I shed a fair amount of tears in that garden. Just again, not necessarily sad tears, but just washing away. I don't know. I wish I could put it into better words now, but there, like I said, there's a lot of anticipatory grief that you're carrying. And I wanted to be sure that mom didn't feel like she needed to take care of me. I wanted to be there to take care of her. Of course, she was my mom, and I was like thinking, oh my God, I can't imagine my mom's going to be gone. And I feel like sometimes I felt like my heart was literally going to break in half. And I would go out in the garden and I would be reminded that this is all, and that doesn't mean, even if you understand it, it doesn't mean that you're not going to still feel the feels. You feel it. But I let myself feel it, and the garden was a safe place for me to feel it.
I love that. My mom died when I was 28,
Mm,
and you know, I did the same. I was nowhere near where I often wonder what I would do differently if she was entering her last stage now versus, at 28, I was still, I had been taught, but I was, but
yeah,
that was my refuge. I would,
yes.
and we had a lot of people. I have 8 brothers and sisters, so it was a big circle.
Yeah.
And I would run out. I remember I would go out to the garden, and it was just so cathartic. And I could
Mhm.
I could release everything into the earth, and it wasn't going to touch anybody in the circle. So
Yeah.
for me, it really is a universal connection for me between, my mom and the earth and whatever was coming next for her, which, I'm like you. I believe at some point God and science, everything is connected, and it is all a part of one entity that
Yeah.
has, just it expands into so many other things.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so, okay. I want to talk a little bit about the writing of the book. Um,
Mhm.
what writing, choosing to die, how is it revealed to you? And talk about the grief that you may have felt while you were writing it,
Mm.
clarity, and sovereignty. So let's I'll let you touch on each one of those as you seem fit to.
The I've always been, because I've had a couple of businesses, my yoga studio and then teaching somatics. I've always sent out a newsletter, and I've always loved writing. And it's always, for me, I mean, more than the physical practices, which are very useful, it's always been the spiritual part um, of these modalities that drew me in. And that's where my writing would always land, was in the bigger philosophical, spiritual meaning of what it is we're doing. And so I kept a journal while I was at mom's, because I know how fast memories fade. And I wanted to my daughter wasn't able to be with us, and I wanted to be able to share it with her. And I just wanted to remember accurately. I really had no intention that I was going to write a book about it. And once I got home, I had signed up for a 1 year women's writing offering that was through Right on Door County where I live. And we met so 12 women meet once a month. And we had two mentors, and it's called Writing the Story of Our Lives. And so one day we had to draw a word out of a hat and then meditate on that word and then free write for 15 minutes. And I drew the word water. And it was maybe about a year after mom had died. And the thing that came to my mind when I closed my eyes was the sound of mom's breathing when she would go into congestive heart failure and the water in her lungs and her watery eyes. And so I just started writing. I mean, the very first line of the preface, my mom is drowning. Coarse, wet rattles announce her inhalations, followed by incomplete and ineffective imposters posing as exhalations. Her hazel gray eyes glisten as they fix on mine. So the preface just sort of poured out of me. And I mean, when you write a book, there is a lot of editing. It was a 4 year process for me. And I never changed the preface. The preface came out. I loved it. And then I just thought, I think I'm going to write about this. And I knew the garden had to be part of it. And I made a list of, I would say the first two chapters and the preface really just like I wrote them quickly. And then the rest of the book was where I learned to be a writer and I learned that I can write. So I made a list of mom's flowers that were in her garden of the perennials. And I thought I'm going to have each chapter. And then I attached one of those flowers to a situation in the journal where I felt like I could weave in the story of botany of what was going on with that plant at that time with mom's story. And I mean, I laughed, I cried, I was very careful not to write my sister's story because I don't know their story and I didn't want them to feel like I was speaking for them, but I included them. And so I would write a chapter and I would call them and say, can we have a sister chat? And I'd read it to them and I'm like, am I remembering this clearly? Is there anything else? So, and then sometimes, there were times where I was just like, I don't know, I'm not sure. How do I proceed? And if I didn't have a prompt from my mom's story, I would just start reading a book on botany. And I swear I never got past a page before something in the botany book would jump out at me and I would go, oh yeah, that was just like when mom was blah, 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 her venous insufficiency or, thinking about the primary veins and leaves and how that ties in with our vascular system. So um, I still, I have every writer probably has their favorite sections and their, uh, you know, I, I spoke at a book club that has been going for 74 years the other day, and
My
I
gosh.
know 74 years continuously. Somebody has to die for you to get into it.
Now that's a club I would gladly wait on the list for.
But by the end of as I got talking about it, 'cause I'm being careful that I don't want to give away the content of the book because I think it's a beautiful book. Even I mean, if I do say
Oh,
so myself.
I bought one for my daughter and my son, and I said,
Aw,
and hopefully it will get there. I got it off Amazon, of course.
yes.
And I told him, I said, look, I said, I haven't written my book yet, but she has. So read hers first, and then you'll really understand mine.
Oh, I love that. Well, I mean, there's usually a moment where tears will well up, but they're tears of um, they're tears that are rich with the fullness of the experience. And and I wrote about that when I got back home and was still trying to teach while I was at mom's and I had to take a break. I had to just let myself really sit in the sensations that came along with the finality of mom leaving her physical body, of actually her body dying. But I wrote that I don't want to rush through this. I want to feel it. I want to feel the ache that feels like it's going to bring me to my knees, because it's just a reflection of the importance of this relationship. And so, and I still feel that. And there are moments where, I mean, it's been 5 years now, but there are still moments where, grief will just well up and tears will come, or however it wells up. And I'm
Yeah.
always grateful for those moments. I love those moments.
I feel the same way. I have my mom. I to this day, Mother's Day comes by. Maybe not on Mother's Day, but that whole week
Yep.
before and everything. And there are just times when I'm doing something. I'm with a dying person, and I just that grief of my mom. It reminded me, and I'm like, I remember this in my mom. There's a remembering that goes on, and then to this day. My 17-year-old daughter, she died, and even today I still have grief,
Yes. Yeah.
and but I knew, oh, excuse me, good grief. Thank God I can edit those out. um, but one of the things that I still go with is I don't know that people always ask me, well, does it ever get better? And I can honestly say it for me, it's never gotten better. It's just different,
Yeah.
you know, and that's okay. That's part of the wonder and the brilliance of it, Um, but so yeah, I do understand that whole being okay with it, and
Hmm.
I think anytime, I think grief is something that we have also put a huge, horrible negative connotation on.
Right. Like, get over it.
Yeah, like be strong,
Yeah.
enough is enough,
Yeah.
Um, but it's like you said, you have to feel the feel.
Yeah.
And when you feel the feel and you process it mentally, and then you bring whatever your spiritualness is into it, that's
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah.
And healing goes on, in my book, it goes on until you die.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. I
people
mean,
say, people who have said, well, I'm healed. You're still healing, you
I mean,
know.
energetically, it's just, I mean, I guess I think of it as, when I think what I have heard when I listen to people, when I've been with people whose people were dying, most of the fear shows up if people don't have a sense of, if they think it's like a real finality, maybe, or I mean, it is a finality when we leave our bodies and our bodies die. But I have always felt that it's a transformation,
Yeah,
and that energetically, the energy that I was will always be, not
yeah.
in this form. The energy that mom was will always be, not in the form of mom's physical body. And I don't think of this as woo-woo either. I really don't. I mean, if we take ourselves down to the tiniest, most molecular version of ourselves, we're spinning molecules of energy bashing into each other, right?
We're just protons.
We're just protons. I
Yeah,
mean, and this is the part where I feel like science and God come together. I mean, this is what I think someone like Einstein got
yeah.
really quickly, where the rest of us go through our whole life and maybe have a glimmer of it.
Well,
So,
we're so good at compartmentalizing everything.
yes.
World, it can't. The two can't possibly overlap. It
Yeah.
reminds me of my brother when the peas couldn't touch the corn. Okay, but you understand that when you eat them, they're all mixed together. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
so and I think that's a huge part of where I think we just don't. we spend so much time teaching people about birth, and we have so many amazing plans and all this stuff, and then when it comes to living, we're good at that, but we put so, living now becomes just struggling, and I don't think people really understand living, and then when you come to death, it's all of a sudden we shouldn't talk about that, or we're so uneducated about it.
You know what? I used to teach. I mean, I used to say when I taught all the time. So think about this in terms of, for instance, if you're learning a movement. I mean, even if you've never practiced yoga or somatic movement, but you've maybe been to physical therapy or whatever, but you're learning a new movement. And I always used to say this, we pay so much attention to the beginning, and then we sort of ignore the middle. And then the ending comes up as a real surprise.
Yeah.
And, so like, can we be present for all of it,
Yeah.
for the entire experience, for the hard and the soft?
Yeah.
But that requires a lot of huge cultural shifts because our whole culture is focused externally,
Hmm.
everything outside of ourselves. We've
Yes.
created a culture that is that's just, pays attention to everything outside of ourselves and not what's inside of us, what really, you know, the most important, right? The most important part.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning present,
Yeah.
and um, I talk a lot about being present, and I remind people presence is a skill. It's
Yes.
not something that you're just born with. It
Right.
actually takes, you know, a set of tools and actually implementing it. It's different from being aware.
Yeah.
Awareness you can have by meditating, by
Yeah.
going to your yoga classes, but to stay in that present moment after you leave those classes and to
Yeah.
carry that present, that takes skill.
Yeah.
Because for most part, when you're out the yoga door and now you're in the car and you got to go pick up the kid, and whatever presence you had in that room is no longer in the same space. And
Yeah.
I think the same thing. One of the things that I remember when my children were born, my grams and my mom were there. And for my first child, my mother leaned in and she said, "Man, she's going to be legacy, baby. She's going to be a legacy." And my grandmother, she chimed in and she said, "Remember, my child, her death clock started ticking with her first breath as well.
Mm.
Side by side, they'll now walk. Your child, you'll walk
Yeah.
knowing that they have breath and they also have death coming." And to me, that was the most aware thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It made me understand that the first breath was also the first part of death.
Yeah. That's
You
so
know,
beautiful. I
it,
love
it
that.
was, it's the first time that you're actively going to be introduced to death.
Hmm.
And what a better
Yeah.
way to do it. Because,
Yeah.
like you said, by the time you get to the middle, most people don't even think about it.
No.
One of the things that I tell parents, especially after my daughter died, was make a plan for your children. Well, most
Hmm.
parents have no death plan for their children. They
Right.
just don't see it happening. And
Yeah.
then when it happens, of course, it's, crisis mode at that particular moment.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wanted to also talk a little bit about, well, we've been hitting on it, but let's talk about the emotional and the ethical and the spiritual terrain of choosing that death. I mean, were you all on the same page as far as your mom was obviously ready to do it, and I'm sure she had worked out her ethics and everything. Did she talk about any of that with you guys, or did you and your
Well,
sisters have that conversation, away from your
mhm.
mom?
My mom, if you read the book, no, when you read the book, energetically, let's use the right words. When you read the book, you'll read my mom's story, and she had quite a not harrowing, but she was in many different foster homes, and she's she's a child of immigrants that settled in Canada that were poor. And so she really didn't have anything to grasp onto until she met and married my dad at a very young age. And then she became, and they were Italian, Catholics, Italians. So
Oh.
my mother became the poster child for being a Catholic. I mean, it was, and you have to know that the Catholic Church is, of course, one of the greatest opponents of MAID. And so, um, but mom was very clear about that. And, I went to, when I had gotten there, she had scheduled a conversation with a nun who had been visiting her during when she was in the hospital. And she was in the hospital off and on quite a bit. And I said, "Why, Mom? Why would you have this conversation? She's just going to try to talk you out of it, and it's going to create stress." And she said, "Teresa, if she can talk me out of it, I shouldn't be going through with it." And the way she said that, I was just like, whoa, okay. I stand in your power, Mom. I get it. And she said to me, man's interventions are keeping me alive. Man's interventions have helped create this torture, and man's interventions will now be used to end it. She said, "My relationship with God is clear. I am not concerned about that at all." And she prayed the rosary. She prayed three rosaries on three different rosaries every night for years. And each of my sisters and myself each have in our, she gifted us each one of these beautiful rosaries. And so I'm, I personally stepped away from the Catholic Church as a teenager because it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't step away from God. I stepped away from a bunch of rules that didn't make sense to me. So, and I think for my sisters, we all it wasn't, we didn't have to agree. This is the thing, Paula. This is the thing I really, as the more podcasts that I've done, the more writing I've done, the more I understand why I'm doing this. And part of the message that I really focus on is yes, mom chose maid. And and I agree. As I say to people, I don't think everybody should choose maid, but I think everybody should have the choice. I want to have the choice. I don't know if I would choose it, but I want to have the choice. So what our choice was how we would show up for mom at the end of her life.
That's
And
beautiful.
that is what to me, that's the message of the bigger message of the book is we're all going to die. Um, can we put enough thought and reflection into what that process means to us and to those we love, and can we let ourselves just show up for that person without laying our own grief and values and rules and everything else on top of them? I mean, what if mom had said, I'll tell you, it would have been harder for me if mom had said, I want to do every intervention known to man until there's just no possibility. I mean, in a way, she kind of did that, but um, somebody might choose that. I mean, can you show up for that? So um, I think my sisters and I, we all have, I mean, everyone in a family has their own sense of timing, and um, we all had individual moments where we're just so, we're so hardwired to live. I mean, I think it's, survival of the species, right? So I think it's literally hardwired into our nervous system. And even mom didn't want to die. Mom didn't want to, it wasn't that mom wanted to live, but mom didn't want to suffer anymore. She couldn't carry the suffering anymore. And, so that was when this choice became like a no-brainer for all of us because we had all watched her suffer. And I think that we had watched her it breaks your heart to see someone that you love suffering, and knowing I knew as a nurse there was nothing more that could be done. I mean, we had done every medical intervention, and my mom and my sister, I have a sister who's a very, very powerful energy healer, um, practices Reiki and other different forms of energy healing. We had done everything that we could do conventionally and non-conventionally. And it was time. The thing is, what do you do? We have where you can stop eating and drinking for as a possibility, for those states where we don't have maid. I mean, I thought about it. I could have told mom, stop taking all of your medications. And I mean, she was on a boatload of medications, but what would that have looked like? It could have just looked like such a giant shit show of suffering. When we have the means to do it peacefully, what is the difference between having somebody take 40 medications for, you know, uh, whatever disease process they're taking them for, and giving somebody a medication that can help them peacefully exit? Again, I think, nurses get very practical about this. And so I was able to help my sisters with that. But um, I, I don't for a minute, I don't for a minute think that mom made the wrong choice. And I have a sister that has actually attended another maid since mom, and it was someone she was cleaning house for. And this lady had been struggling with a cancer that was not going to go away for over 10 years. And she was a skeleton and she was miserable. And and Mel called me up and she's like, do I talk to her about this? And um, I said, why not? I mean, you can, just does she understand that she has a choice? This is the thing. Do people understand that they have a choice? Now, we don't want to coerce people into this, but when I was working in transplant, and I was really struggling at that point near the end with why are we doing this? Um, and some people have a wonderful experience with transplant and lived for many, many years. But um, I had to realize, I thought, how can I continue to do this job? And I thought, Theresa, you are an educator, and your role, and again, this is exactly what I was saying, right? My role was not to understand why somebody was making that decision or even agree with it. My role was to make sure that they understood the decision that they were making, they were really trading one set of circumstances for another that was going to be equally as time consuming, because now you're going to be carrying around a tackle box full of medications that you're going to be taking for the rest of your life. And again, with no judgment whatsoever, but understand that when somebody's organ gets put inside of you, you create an environment that is going to require a certain kind of care for the rest of your life. And so I really just did my best to make sure that people were really fully educated so they could make an informed decision. And that's what it's all about, right? Informed consent.
I believe that. And
Yeah.
I believe that, um, not only should the choices be there, but we should be explained. I'm a person of, I believe in duality. I believe that, if someone chooses, like you said, to continue with treatment upon treatment upon treatment upon treatment, somewhere in their own special energy vibration, that is what their last journey is supposed to look like for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
That's their final stage. That they wrote it and they want to live it.
Yeah.
All everyone else, you're the stage hands, you're the
Yeah.
prop people, you're
Yeah.
the lighting, you're the sound people.
Yeah.
You don't get to rewrite the story. You don't get to edit it or anything else. This person it's their last viable choice here as a human being.
Yeah.
And who better to know when their body can't do anymore or can do more than the actual person who's living it?
Exactly.
And I don't, and a lot of people will tell me, well, when they get that way, they don't think clearly. No, I think the opposite
Yeah.
happens. I
Yeah.
think they've run through every scenario, they've played out every frame of that movie all different ways. And this is how they want the ending to be, whether it's medical aid in dying, whether it's voluntary stop of eating and drinking, whether it's hospice.
Yeah.
You know, there,
Yeah.
and I think that as long as you understand what each one, because each one has not consequences to it, but there is the other shoe that's going to drop no matter which one you pick.
Yeah.
Same with transplants, same with doing chemo and radiation.
Yeah.
Yes, it may help that, but understand it may collapse your heart as well.
Yeah.
So as long as everybody is in the knowing and has a clear picture, I think that the person themselves that are actually going through it, I think if they have clarity and honesty, and I think honesty is clarity.
Yeah.
And if you can actually sit down in a room and have that conversation honestly, clearly, then, like you said, there probably isn't going to be a bad decision made.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, there's not going to be any remorse about, oh, did we do the right? No, because you all were very, everybody was honest to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question. And this is one that was probably not on the list. It was just something that I came up with this morning, last minute.
Okay.
So I would like to talk a little bit. We've been talking about, the spiritual side and everything, but I would like you to describe the mental shift that's required to support someone's decision to to do the medical aid and dying. What kind of mental shift does the death doula or the daughter or anybody else in that scenario?
Well, I think, the mental shift is that um, we stop doing things that are going to prolong life, and we start focusing mentally on how we can best facilitate this end of life.
Okay.
And, that's it sounds easy, but it's huge because, again, like I said, we're hardwired to live. We're hardwired to, um, it's like when I'm sure you've seen this, and I used to see this. Well, my own husband, okay, my own husband went and spent 3 weeks with his mother before she died, and they were from Kentucky, the hills of Kentucky, and I never saw her without a non-filter cigarette hanging out of her mouth and ashes, flicking all over the place, and um, then, when she was maybe in her mid 70s or something, people hounded her enough that she quit smoking. And then during those last few days, I wasn't there, but I remember Pete calling me and he's like, Mom, Mom wants a cigarette. And I'm like, give her a cigarette for God's sakes. She's leaving her body. I mean, let her go and let her go as light and as bright as she can. Who cares? So, when you hear people saying, oh, she's not eating anymore, she's not drinking anymore, it's okay. We don't need that is actually all a natural part of what's happening. So I think it's just this real cognitive shift to not not promoting things that we think we need to extend life, and instead, hey, if someone doesn't want to eat or drink anymore, like I said in the book with Mom, my mom and her sweet tooth, like, eat dessert first,
I
Mom.
remember that.
And
Yeah.
that's eat dessert first.
Yep. Yeah. I just love that part. And I'm with you on that. I also believe too that the more educated people understand that the body knows what to do when it's
Yes,
dying.
yes,
Just
yeah,
like women know how to birth a child, I mean, it's great that the doctors are there and everything, but we know how to do it
yes,
without all that. And
yes,
I think death is the same way. The body knows how to shut down, and eating and drinking is part of it, and
yeah,
it doesn't need to digest food anymore because its expiration date is
yeah,
arriving very soon.
yeah,
And and if we just get out of the way and let it happen,
Yeah.
Let's provide comfort care. Of course, no one wants, but like you said, I I had a guest on my podcast, a Dr. Casseret, and he was a doctor. You know, he was a palliative
Hmm.
care doctor, or I'm sorry, he transferred over to being a palliative care. But before that, he was just a doctor. And he said, we are trained not to give up. We extend
Right.
life no matter what. That is our job. We save lives.
Hmm.
And we keep doing it and we keep doing it. And so I said, okay, now that you're a palliative care doctor, what's changed? And he said, the fact that I think we, as doctors and nurses, that we should just stop and be still and wait to see what the body's telling us.
Exactly.
And not, he said,
Exactly.
one of the things we rush to do is if the blood pressure goes too low, we pump them with medicines to make the blood pressure come up. And then the blood
Hmm.
pressure's up, but maybe their blood sugars are now up. So he said, we're
Hmm.
so busy doing
Hmm.
that we're not stopping to see what we're doing.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
true.
thought that was perfect, you know.
Hmm.
And I told him, I said, I'm so honored that you're a palliative care doctor now. I imagine your patients are just thrilled to death that they have
Hmm.
a doctor who says, no, I'm not going to do anything. Let's just wait and see.
Yeah.
Let's trust the body to figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that. All right. We've talked about so much, and
Hmm.
it's just been a joy for me. Your energy is amazing, and the book is outstanding. And I know I got an e-published, but I would like to have one autographed
Hmm.
if you would do that. So we'll work that out. I'll buy
Yeah.
one you could do, but you will now go into my collection of authors that I have.
Aw.
So I really appreciate you sharing and all your insights that you brought. So before I wrap it up and we say goodbye, is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners? Would you like to tell us where they can grab your books, how they can do it? It's your show, my lady. Take it and let us wrap this up with your final words.
Oh, thanks, Paula. Well, first of all, so I have a website. Let me just say that, I opted to independently publish this book. I really thought long and hard about it. I think had I wanted to, I probably could have um, got an agent and gone a different route. I do believe the book is of that quality, but I want it to retain the content. I want it to be able to use it the way I chose to use it for educational purposes. This is how I really, I mean, this is how I am going to spend this phase of my life. I'll be 67 this year, and I've always been a teacher. It's in my genes. I love teaching, and I will now be teaching and sharing with how we can die, how we can have a good death.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't want to take a chance of not being able to own my content. And last year there were 6 million books published last year. So that is a big sea of books. So I'm just asking your listeners and everyone out there, I'm promoting shamelessly because I think the message is worth promoting. I have a website. It's Theresa with an H, theresaeevans.com. You can go on that website, on my website, and you can purchase the ebook, your Kindle version, right off the website directly from me. And then there's also links to the usual suspects. I'm not, I mean, I of course love not to have my book on Amazon, but most books are bought on Amazon. So Amazon, but Tertulia, bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, all of those are places that you can um, purchase the book online. And I also want people to know that I'm available for workshops, for public speaking on this topic. Um, I'm hoping that I will be able to grow that. So if you're listening and you're maybe, or even book clubs, you want to have this, there's so much fodder for good conversation in this book. And, I thought, wow, I could show up via Zoom at any book club and have a conversation with the members. So, um, yeah, so it's my mission now. My mission is to get the word out there that it is possible to have a good death. It is, but it requires some education and some thoughtfulness and some, that's, I mean, I'm here to help facilitate that now. And I have another book in me. I'm just right now it's a big job to get a book out there. And
Yeah.
but I plan on writing about the 2 years of following this experience as I rebuilt a new garden in a new space, and let myself grieve and mourn the passing of my mother's physical body. So I hope to be digging into that pretty soon. Yeah, and I have a Substack, choosing death at choosing death or at Theresa E. Evans. So, and word of mouth, you know what? This is going to be a book that gets out there. I feel like this book will get out there to the people that need to read it by word of mouth, by people saying, well, like you did, but sending copies to your kids. And so I'm just asking everybody who supports death literacy, um, and thinks that this topic is important to do their best to help me get the book out there.
Well, it sounds like you're heading for an amazing journey. And I want you to know that for the next month, when it's my turn to do death cafes in my area, your
Ah,
book will be the highlighted, each and every one. I'll take a different chapter, and that's what we're going to talk about.
I love that.
So I'm going to do that at the Death Cafe, and then also I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I will get in touch with you. I may have you appear Zoom. I want to do a farm to table uh, death dinner kind of deal with a
Yeah.
local farming thing, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to have a couple guest speakers come in over the course of our dinner. The chef wants to make a 3-course dinner kind of deal, so we're working that out, but anyways, I'm going to wrap it up. All the links for Theresa's book will be in the description, and they will all be readily available. If you have any questions, of course, you guys just email me, send me your questions. If I don't know them, I'll send them to Theresa, and you guys can talk however you
Yeah.
need to talk. So thanks again for joining me, and it's been a pleasure. So
Thank you, Paula. Thank you
hopefully
so
we'll have
much.
round 2 when
Yeah.
your next books comes
Yeah,
out. So good luck.
exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Goodbye and thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.